Hello!
Hello, AOS fans!
It's the Agents of Beastgrave, back again for video 3.
Video 3 of our How to Play Warhammer Underworlds.
Yes.
So this is video 3, and today we are talking about building your deck.
Ooh. So your deck in Underworlds is quite important. It's pretty much, I'd say, probably at least half of the game. When you build your deck, there are certain rules that you have to follow. Now, straight out of the box, you're not going to have to worry too much about this because you get a deck, comes pre-built with all your warband cards in. But once you get past that point and you want to build your own, maybe you've got some of the other warbands as well and you want to know what the limitations are, well, they're pretty simple. You have to have 12 objectives.
You have to, they're the gold ones, you have to have 12 of those. You can have no less and no more than 12.
Yes. After that, you have to have at least 20 what are called power cards. Now, they're the grey ones, but they're split into two sections, which can be a little bit more confusing.
Yes, it's even more confusing than that, as we would explain, because one of the sections is split into two.
Yes. So the first set of cards you get is your gambit cards. Now, they're things that enable you to do stuff immediately, like shove somebody over or do some damage to somebody.
Yeah.
But that also then gets split into two other sections. You have gambit ploys and you have gambit spells.
Yep, spells can only be used by magic users. Not every warband has a magic user, and you have to kind of have a specific kind of deck build to utilise spells. We'll come on to that. It's a bit more advanced, but so there are spells, but everybody uses ploys. And to be honest, the toughest part of the game is choosing which ploys to leave out, because pretty much all the ploys are great, and you want to use them, and you're scratching your head thinking which one to get rid of. So the ploys, they're things you can do immediately, and they're largely unstoppable, and you can use them without cost. Whereas the other type of card are the upgrades, and they kind of permanently upgrade your fighter, make them permanently faster, make them permanently more accurate, make them permanently harder to kill.
Yes.
But you do have to spend glory to use them. We'll come on to that in the how to play the game section, but they go permanently on a single fighter, whereas a ploy can be
used in many different ways.
Yeah. So your power deck is fairly straightforward. You're basically going to be picking cards that you want to utilise with your fighters to make them stronger, tougher, and do special tricks. Your objective deck is kind of like the meat of the game, however, and it's a little bit more subtle. Your game is going to be won and lost in your objective deck, because your objective deck is largely how you score glory. There are two ways to score glory in the game. One is for killing fighters, but the objective deck has glory tokens on them, and there are different amounts. So most cards only have one glory. Some cards have two. There's a few with 3, and there are some with even more than that, but they start to get impossibly difficult to score, and you don't tend to see them very often, certainly in competitive play.
Yes. You're much better going for more reliable 1 or 2 glory cards than you are less reliable 3 or 4 glory cards.
Yeah, and there are a number of different types of objective card. As the game has evolved, more types have come along. We're kind of just going to cover the 3 main types today, which is surge objectives, end phase objectives, and the rarely seen but still quite powerful third end phase objectives.
So surge objectives are scored immediately when you meet the criteria on the card. So that criteria might mean killing somebody, or casting a couple of spells, or rolling a certain value on your dice. But you have to pay attention to what those criteria are, because the minute you meet them, you can score that objective, grab that glory, and more importantly, pick another objective card.
So surge cards are really powerful, because A, you immediately score glory, which immediately means you can apply an upgrade, or immediately means you're winning the game, which immediately means your opponent feels under pressure. So you are surging forward. You're going to win this game, maybe. But that's really important. So you've got glory on the board already. That's the first thing. The second thing is you immediately draw a new objective card, which means you can't immediately score that card, but you might be able to score that card in the next round if you're lucky enough to have picked another surge. So again, you're cycling through your deck, which is really important, because basically every card in your objective deck is a way of getting essentially victory points. Glory is essentially victory points, and the added bonus that you can use them to make your fighters better by spending them to pay for your objectives. So getting through the deck is really important. It's the way to win. The really, really good decks in this game just power through that objective deck to rack up the glory score.
Now the second kind of objective card you've got is the end phase card, and that's the more common card. Most of the time there'll be 1 or 2 glory, there are some 3s, and what will happen is at the end of the round, and we'll cover that in a later video, you will see how many of those objectives you scored, and they might be things like make 4 attack actions, or stand on 3 objectives, or have killed 5 of your opponent's models, that kind of thing. And if you meet the criteria, then you'll draw the glory and you'll get rid of that card and you'll pick new ones before you start the next round.
Absolutely. And the final one we talked about was the third end phase. It's pretty straightforward, really. The game is broken down to 3 phases, which the game will cover in a later video. They can only be scored right at the very end of the game. They tend to be your big glory scorers, but the problem with them is if you draw them early in the game, you've got to carry them all the way through if you're going to score them, and that can be tough. So that's something you do have to think about. There are opportunities in the game to discard cards, which again we'll cover in a later video. But in an ideal world, you don't want to be discarding any objective cards because they're your bread and butter. They're your path to victory.
They're what you're going to win with.
See what I did there?
Lovely.
One final thing which we will cover maybe a little bit more when we talk about tactics and rules and things, but it's worth noting, in championship play you can only carry 6 surges at the time of recording.
Yep.
It's just 6, and that's important because the temptation will be to pack your deck full as many as you possibly could because they tend to be easier to score, but they have restricted it to just 6 in a standard championship game.
Now you need to have at least 20 cards in total in your power deck, and they have to be split evenly, so you can have at least half of them, but no less, have to be upgrades.
Yeah.
So if you've got 21 cards, you can have 11 upgrades and 10 gambit cards. That's fine. You can have 22 cards in total and make it 11-11. A lot of people tend to stick around 10 of each or 11 of each.
Yes, it's worth bearing in mind when you're first starting out that you might think, oh, well, all these points are great and I really, really want to include them. So I'm going to have 50, but then you'd have to have 50 of the other ones and you'd have a deck of 100, which would be very unwieldy. You could do it, but of course one thing you have to remember is the more cards you've got in, the less chance there is of your card coming out, and the probabilities of getting cards into your hand, because you can only play them out of your hand when you draw them, because that's a real key part of the game is maximising the power of your deck to do what you wanted to do at the time you wanted to do it.
Yep. Now, there are some other terminology bouncing around about deck builds that you might hear mentioned online. There are different formats of the game you can play. Because this is Season 3, there are a lot of older cards, and some of which they've rotated out of the game, which means you can't use them anymore.
Well, yeah, there are 3 ways of playing. There is championship format, which is, to be honest, is the way most people play. So that when Pete said you can't use them anymore, he pretty much was true. If you turned up not playing championship rules to an event or even just a friendly session, people probably look at you like you've grown an extra head. But so that is championship play. That is the main way, and we will probably for most of these videos be assuming that everybody's playing championship because that tends to be how everybody does it.
Yeah.
But there is relic play, which enables you to basically use all of the cards from any season, which at the moment is only 3. But obviously as time goes on, will expand. But you will be able to use any season. I can imagine that get very unwieldy after a while because there are already something in the region of 1,500 cards available across the 3 seasons, and it's only going to get bigger. And then finally there's friendly, which is friendly. I mean, most people when they're playing friendly, they do tend to use championship rules for that, but you kind of anything kind of goes. If your opponent agrees that you can use old cards or some old cards, then that's fine. In tournaments, you always have to use the official cards from the boxes. But in friendly play, if you just want to test something out, but you haven't bought the particular set of cards, your opponent probably won't mind if you print one out and just play it as a proxy, or even just write it on a post-it and stick it in a class leaf. Yeah.
Now, what championship and relic means is that there are certain cards that you can only take a certain number of. It's probably not worth worrying about right now what that is, because it's a list that Games Workshop produce quite regularly, but it does change often.
Just so you're aware, there are some cards at a given time that are restricted and banned. It's called the Forsaken and restricted list, the far list, and so that changes. It doesn't change very, very often, but it does change, and it can change without warning. So you do need to be aware that it exists, and you also do need to be aware that basically if you're playing championship play, only the most current 2 seasons cards are valid.
Yep.
So at the moment, Beastgrave and Nightbolt, which is seasons 2 and 3, are valid, but Shadespire aren't. If you're watching this video in October, then probably season 4 will be out, and all the Nightbolt cards will have gone from championship play too.
Gone away. The other kind of card that's worth mentioning is that you do get faction-specific cards. Now, some are universal and some are faction-specific, and you can tell by the logos that are printed up in the corner. If it's got a universal symbol on, that means that anybody can use it in any warband. But if you get one with a faction symbol, that means only your faction, your warband, can use that card.
Absolutely, and I should have said, Pete, when I said the Shadespire cards have got rotated out, it is only the universal cards that are rotated out from a given season. If you're playing an old warband, if you're playing, say, the Iron Skull's Boys or Steelheart's Champions from Season 1, you're still perfectly allowed to use the cards that come in that box that are specific to that faction, which have the specific Auroch or Steelheart's symbol on every faction-specific card has a little symbol in the top corner that denotes which faction it belongs to.
So there you go. That's the basics of building a deck. We're not going to go into the minutiae and the tactical side of things. We just want to give you broad strokes in all these videos. So do check out. There's a lot of guides online that you'll be able to look up to give you more information on how to build effective decks.
Yes, do check out Well of Power, particularly great website if you're learning to play. It's well worth looking at. It's got everything on there from deck building to miniatures, tactics, and ball placement. Everything. It's really good website.
So we'll see you soon in the Beastgrave.